Communications.
So I'm a plumber and I'm on site for a job. And we got we're snaking a drain, and we've been pulling back. We probably pulled back about 10 pounds, 15 pounds of it looks like flesh type of stuff, meat, and we don't know what it is.
Some killers hide in plain sight, right in front of us. They blend into everyday life until one simple mistake cracks open their darkest secrets.
Somebody killed a woman and dumped her remains. We are live over the Oshawa Harbor. Good evening. The busy spot along the waterfront is now a disturbing crime scene.
The discovery made by a fisherman and his grandson. They saw a torso in the water.
For Adam Strong, that mistake was something as ordinary as a clogged drain. When plumbers arrived at his Oshawa basement apartment in 2018, they expected a usual job. Instead, they found a horror that linked two missing young women nearly a decade apart. This is the chilling story of how a plumbing call solved not just one, but two cold cases. In August 2017, the disappearance of 18-year-old Rori Hache set off warning bells in Oshawa, Ontario. Rori was described as outgoing, trusting, and full of energy. She was also 5 months pregnant at the time she went missing, which only increased her family's fear. Weeks later, fishermen made a terrific discovery. A female torso was washed up on the shores of Lake Ontario. DNA testing confirmed it was Rori. The rest of her body remained missing, and investigators were left with far more questions than answers. But what no one knew then was that Rori was not Adam Strong's first victim. Nearly a decade earlier, in 2008, another young woman had gone missing under equally mysterious circumstances. Her name was Kandis Fitzpatrick. Just 19 years old, she had struggled with difficult situations in life, but her family loved her and never gave up hope of finding her. Unfortunately, her disappearance went cold, with no remains and no solid leads. For almost 10 years, her case sat unsolved. But what came after was shocking. Both young women had unknowingly crossed paths with the same predator, Adam Strong. Living in a basement apartment, Strong was seen to be just another quiet tenant. But behind the closed doors, he had violent, disturbing fantasies. He was behind vulnerable young women, pulling them into his home under the guise of companionship. Once they got inside, they would become trapped in his world of control and violence. Rori's final hours were especially brutal. Evidence later revealed that Strong assaulted her, then struck her repeatedly with a hammer. To make sure that she was dead, he cut up her body and attempted to dispose of the remains. For Kandis, investigators believe a similar fate awaited her in the very same apartment. Though her body was never found, DNA evidence tied her to Strong's home, showing she too had been killed and gotten rid of there. But this was not the end of the story. There was something more cruel to it. For years, Strong kept his secrets hidden. He lived quietly, blending into the community, while families grieved without answers. He managed to cover up not just one crime, but two. It seemed as though both cases might remain unsolved forever, and that he would remain free of all charges. But Adam Strong's arrogance and one small mistake would ultimately bring his fate of silence to an end. On November 8, 2018, more than a year after Rori Hache had vanished, a plumbing problem had happened. And then they found the horrifying truth hidden inside Adam Strong's apartment. It started like any other call. Tenants living above Strong's Oshawa basement suite had complained of clogged pipes and foul smells. A pair of plumbers was sent to investigate. As they worked their way through the tangled plumbing system, they noticed something strange. The blockage was not grease or food scraps. There was something wrong. It looked and felt disturbingly like flesh. Alarm bells went off immediately. They collected what they found and phoned the police. When officers arrived, they decided to visit Strong. Knocking on his basement door, they found him calm, quiet, and strangely unbothered. But what happened next would leave them stunned. As officers explained why they were there, Strong casually admitted, "If you want the rest of her, she's in my freezer." Police quickly entered the apartment. What they found was the stuff of nightmares.
You said to the officers, if you're looking for the rest of her, you'll find her in the freezer.
Inside a chest freezer, wrapped and carefully stored, were the cut-up remains of 18-year-old Rori Hache, the same young woman whose torso had been discovered in Lake Ontario the year before. Her missing pieces had been hidden in Strong's home the entire time. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I'm thinking you gotta be solved. Everything is here.
Knives by the bed.
Rory's family, who had clung to the hope of finding answers, were devastated to learn the gruesome reality. But investigators knew their work was only beginning. The apartment itself was a crime scene frozen in time. Bloodstains were found under fresh coats of paint. A bondage device with DNA traces was there in the corner. A knife, pet leash, and freezer samples revealed genetic material, not just from Rori, but from another young woman. That DNA belonged to Kandis Fitzpatrick, who had disappeared a decade earlier. For her family, who had suffered years of uncertainty, this was the first confirmation of what had happened. Detectives worked tirelessly to piece the evidence together, and they found something that brought them chills. One of the most critical moments came during a marathon 12-hour interrogation with Detective Paul Mitten. Strong never gave a straightforward confession.
To you, is the person in that freezer, Rori? I decline to answer that question.
But he dropped chilling admissions throughout the interview.
These things go on for like hours, is that true? Again, it's true.
He admitted to dismembering both women. He described disposing of body parts. And he described himself as though these acts were just chores, mechanical and detached, rather than horrific crimes against human life. The discovery of flesh in the plumbing was more than just a monstrous accident. It was the key that unlocked two long unsolved cases. Without it, Strong might never have been caught. Kandis's disappearance might have remained an open wound with no answers. And Rory's family might have continued searching for the pieces of their daughter that were hidden just beneath their feet, inside that suburban basement apartment. For investigators, the discovery also strengthened how fragile the line is between hidden crimes and exposure. Strong had lived quietly, in plain sight, among ordinary neighbors for years. He held on to his secrets carefully. Yet all it took was a clogged drain, a routine maintenance call, and two suspicious plumbers willing to speak up to bring his dark world crashing down. By the end of that night, Adam Strong's apartment was sealed off as a crime scene. The freezer, the knives, the bondage devices, all of it was cataloged. DNA swabs confirmed the worst fears. Two young women, gone years apart, had been trapped in the same hellish basement. The discovery would eventually move the case to trial, where the evidence became undeniable. But in that moment, on that November evening, it was the plumbing call that turned a hidden predator into a captured killer. There were too many clues that sent shockwaves. From the moment Rori Hache's torso was found floating in Lake Ontario in late 2017, police knew they were dealing with a brutal and calculated crime. But without her remaining body parts, suspects were limited and theories speculative. Everything changed when plumbers dug up the gruesome clog in Adam Strong's pipes in November 2018. Suddenly, all eyes turned to Strong, and investigators began piecing together how he could be tied not just to Rori's death, but to another long, cold case. On a knife and bondage equipment, forensic testing revealed DNA from two separate victims, Rori Hache and Kandis Fitzpatrick. Kandis had been missing since 2008. She had simply vanished, with no witnesses and no leads. For nearly 10 years, her family had no answers. Now, Strong's apartment provided the first undeniable connection. The discovery raised critical questions. Were these crimes impulsive acts of violence, or part of a long-standing pattern? Strong himself gave mixed signals. In his 12-hour interview with Detective Paul Mitten, he stopped short of confessing to murder, but admitted to dismembering both young women. His matter-of-fact delivery was chilling. He spoke as though cutting apart bodies was an unpleasant task, rather than a horrific crime. Prosecutors built their theories around forensic evidence and Strong's behavior. In Rori's case, they argued that her death happened during a sexual assault, gone violently wrong. Marks of blunt force trauma and DNA placed her in Strong's apartment, and his freezer concealed the evidence. In Kandis's case, since they could not find the body, it made it more challenging.
Are you doing this while it's frozen or partially defrosted?
Completely defrosted.
Okay. Now that would take several hours, wouldn't it?
No, backed up full of hot water.
Okay.
Theories also rose about Strong's psychology. He was a reclusive man, living in isolation, with internet searches and past behavior suggesting violent sexual fantasies dating back to his teenage years. Investigators suspected he had stalked vulnerable women, pulled them in, then killed to satisfy his compulsions. The fact that he was able to conceal Kandis's disappearance for nearly a decade strengthened how calculated he was. He was more than anyone could imagine. In the end, the clues spoke louder than Strong ever did. The flesh in the pipes, the blood in the walls, the freezer full of evidence. All of it showed a picture of a hidden predator who had operated in plain sight for years. What started as a clogged drain turned into one of Canada's most disturbing revelations. 2 cold cases solved by a single plumbing call, and a predator finally unmasked. The trial of Adam Strong unfolded as one of the most disturbing cases in Canadian criminal history. The courtroom saw a battle like no other. What began as a plumbing call in 2018 had led investigators into a nightmare of dismemberment, cold case connections, and the chilling confessions of a man who showed no guilt. By 2020, the Crown prosecutors had prepared a case that centered on 2 young women, Rori Hache, who disappeared in 2017, and Kandis Fitzpatrick, who had vanished nearly a decade earlier in 2008. In January 2020, Adam Strong stood before the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in Oshawa. He was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Rori Hache and second-degree murder in the case of Kandis Fitzpatrick. Both families sat in court, facing the man who had taken their daughters' lives and concealed the truth for years. The prosecution built its case on overwhelming forensic evidence. The prosecution's arguments were stronger than ever. Police had discovered Rori's remains in Strong's freezer, with additional DNA linking her to the pipes of his basement apartment. A hammer, stained with her blood, became the centerpiece of the Crown's argument that Strong had struck her during a assault, fulfilling the criteria for first-degree murder. For Kandis Fitzpatrick, although her body was never found, DNA samples matched her to multiple objects in Strong's apartment: a knife, a dog leash, the walls, and the freezer. This evidence showed that she too had been killed and dismembered in the same small basement. Detective Paul Mitten's 12-hour interview played a major role in court. The footage captured Strong making partial admissions. He didn't confess outright, but in chilling, casual tones, he acknowledged cutting up the women's bodies and disposing of their remains.
I wouldn't wager. I had to fill the bathtub up a few times. Keep the water hot? Yes. Gotcha. I don't know if I should really be talking about that, but ultimately you have me on the... There's no getting around that. Yep.
At one point, he described how he did what had to be done after they were dead. These statements were enough to deepen the physical evidence and paint a clear picture of his involvement. The defense had arguments that were shocking. Defense lawyers tried to argue that Strong had not intentionally killed Kandis Fitzpatrick, suggesting instead that her death was the result of other circumstances. They relied heavily on the lack of a body and direct evidence of how she died. For Rori Hache, the defense could not escape the brutality of the facts. Strong's freezer, pipes, and hammer left little room for doubt. And finally, the verdict was sent. After months of testimony, Justice Joseph DeLuca delivered the verdict in 2021. He found Adam Strong guilty of first-degree murder in the killing of Rori Hache. The judge ruled that the evidence clearly showed she was killed during an assault, fulfilling the legal definition of first degree.
Justice Joseph DeLuca told the families the sentence can never undo the harm nor erase the horrors they have endured, but said it can ensure that Mr. Strong will never walk completely free in our community again.
For Kandis Fitzpatrick, the verdict was different. Strong was convicted of manslaughter and not murder. The court concluded that while it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Strong had killed and dismembered her, the Crown could not demonstrate premeditation or the exact circumstances of her death. In sentencing, Justice DeLuca was given the harshest possible penalties under Canadian law.
I'm feeling amazing. What are you guys feeling? Right?
I'm happy. It's a good outcome. Finally, after 13 years, we can move on, start a new chapter now, start honoring my daughter.
For the murder of Rori Hache, Strong was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years.
There was also cheering in the courtroom and the overflow room as the judge told observers that Adam Strong will likely never get out of prison again. He will not be eligible for parole until December 29th, 2042, which is exactly 25 years to the day.
For the manslaughter of Kandis Fitzpatrick, he was handed an 18-year concurrent sentence. His name was also permanently added to the registry, and he was barred from any contact with the victims' families.
I felt right from the get-go that this was a seasoned person that has done this before, because my daughter was tough. She was very tough, and she would not have been an easy catch for anybody to handle, you know what I mean? So I knew he knew what he was doing.
What was even more shocking was that throughout the trial, Adam Strong sat mostly emotionless, showing no outward signs of remorse. Above all, the story serves as a strange reminder of the dangers that can hide unseen. Neither Rori nor Kandis could have imagined the fate that awaited them when they crossed paths with Adam Strong. Their memories now live on through their family's advocacy, public memorials, and ongoing calls for support for missing persons cases across the country. In the end, Adam Strong's name is forever tied to horror. But Rori Hache and Kandis Fitzpatrick are remembered not as victims, but as daughters, friends, and young women whose lives mattered. and whose stories deserve to be told.